She sat across from me, her hands trembling as she spoke. Everyone thinks we're perfect, but in bed, we're strangers. Emily and Mark were the kind of couple that turned heads. They were young, attractive, successful, and to the outside world, inseparable. At dinner parties, their friends would gush about their chemistry, how they finished each other's sentences and shared a laugh that felt contagious. Yet here Emily was, sitting in my office, unraveling a story that even her closest friends would struggle to believe. It started so small, she continued, her voice tight with emotion. A missed kiss here, a polite excuse there. I thought he was just tired or stressed, you know. Work has been crazy for both of us. But months passed, and it just never came back. I'm scared it's gone forever. I nodded, letting her words settle in the space between us. When you say it, what do you mean? Our intimacy, Emily said, her eyes darting to the floor. At first, it was just sex, but now. I don't even know if he sees me that way anymore. He barely touches me, barely even looks at me the same. She paused, her hands twisting in her lap. And the worst part? I don't know if it's me. Did I do something? Am I not enough? Emily's vulnerability was palpable, her questions laced with self-doubt. I leaned forward slightly. Emily, it sounds like this has been weighing on you for a while. Can you tell me more about when you first noticed a change? She drew in a shaky breath, collecting her thoughts. It's hard to say. Maybe a year ago. No, longer. It started with small things, like, he stopped initiating. At first, I didn't mind being the one to start things. But after a while, it felt like he was. I don't know, going through the motions. Like he was just doing it for me. Her words painted a picture of a slow erosion, one that often goes unnoticed until the damage feels irreparable. How did that make you feel? I asked. Emily's eyes glistened, and she gave a bitter laugh. At first, I told myself it didn't matter. I thought, this is normal. Every couple has dry spells. But then, it wasn't just a dry spell. It was avoidance. I'd reach for him, and he'd turn away. Or he'd say, not tonight, I'm tired. And he was tired a lot. What did you do when that started happening? I tried to be understanding. I'd tell myself, he's stressed, or, it's not personal. But after months of this, I don't know. I started to feel resentful. Like, why am I the only one trying? Why does he never want me anymore? Her voice cracked, and she quickly wiped at her cheek. And now I'm just angry all the time. Angry at him for shutting me out, angry at myself for needing this so much. I don't even recognize who we are anymore. I gave her a moment to compose herself before gently asking, have you talked to him about how you're feeling? Emily hesitated, chewing her bottom lip. Not really. I mean, I've tried, but it always ends up in a fight. He says things like, why is this such a big deal to you, or, can't we just be happy without all that? And I don't know how to answer that without sounding shallow or needy. Emily, your needs are valid, I said, my tone firm but kind. Physical intimacy isn't just about the act itself, it's about connection, closeness, feeling seen and valued. It's okay to want that in your relationship. She nodded, her expression still clouded with uncertainty. I just don't know how to fix this. I don't even know where to start. As we wrapped up the session, I reassured her that her feelings were important and that this was just the beginning of understanding the deeper layers of their disconnect. Relationships can look perfect from the outside but still struggle with challenges behind closed doors. Have you ever been in a situation where unspoken issues created distance in your relationships? I'd love to hear your thoughts, leave a comment below and let's talk about it. Sometimes, sharing your story can help others too. I didn't always feel this way, Emily began during our next session. Her voice carried a mix of nostalgia and pain. There was a time when Mark couldn't keep his hands off me. I remember how he used to look at me, like I was the only thing in the world that mattered. Now, I feel like I'm just there. As she spoke, I encouraged her to trace back to the point when things began to shift. Sometimes, clarity lies in the seemingly small moments we overlook. At first, it felt like a phase, she continued. He was under so much pressure at work, tight deadlines, impossible bosses. I told myself it was normal, that I just needed to be patient. But then the excuses started piling up, and they didn't always make sense. I leaned forward slightly, sensing she was ready to go deeper. What kinds of excuses, Emily? She hesitated, looking out the window as if searching for answers. Things like, I'm just not in the mood, or, let's try tomorrow. But tomorrow never came. I don't even remember the last time we were together in that way. Her voice dropped, and she added quietly, it's been over 8 months. 8 months. For a couple that once thrived on intimacy, that was a long time. But I knew there was more to the story. How did that make you feel? I asked, keeping my tone gentle. Frustrated. Confused. Lonely. Emily's voice cracked as she spoke. I started wondering if I was doing something wrong. Did I gain weight? Was I not attractive to him anymore? I even tried, buying new lingerie, setting up romantic evenings. But it was like he didn't even notice. Her cheeks flushed, embarrassment creeping in. And then, one day, I saw his phone. He left it on the counter while he was in the shower, and a message popped up. She paused, and the air between us felt charged. It was from his ex, she finally said. I stayed quiet, letting her continue at her own pace. I wasn't trying to snoop, she said defensively, as if justifying her actions to herself more than to me. But I couldn't help it. The way he was smiling at his phone lately. I had to know why. What did the message say? Emily let out a bitter laugh. Do you still think about that night? That's all it said. But it was enough. Enough to tell me that he was thinking about her, not me. Enough to make me feel like I was nothing. Her hands gripped the edge of the couch, knuckles white. I confronted him that night. He swore it was harmless, that they were just catching up. But why would you talk about that kind of thing with someone you're just catching up with? I nodded, sensing the storm of emotions brewing inside her. What did he say when you told him how it made you feel? Emily looked down, her voice barely above a whisper. He said I was overreacting. That it wasn't what I thought. But, it didn't feel harmless to me. It felt like betrayal. And after that, things got worse. He pulled away even more, and I didn't know how to bring him back. We sat in silence for a moment, letting her words settle. Then I asked, Emily, have you ever shared with Mark what you truly need from him, beyond just the physical? She shook her head. I don't know how. Every time I try to talk about it, he shuts down or gets defensive. It's like he doesn't want to deal with it. Sometimes, avoidance is a defense mechanism, I explained. It doesn't mean he doesn't care. It could mean he's afraid, of failing, of not being enough, or even of confronting his own feelings. But these conversations are essential, even if they're uncomfortable. Her eyes met mine, filled with both hope and uncertainty. But what if he doesn't want to have them? What if he doesn't want me anymore? That's a fear worth exploring, I said gently. But remember, intimacy isn't just about the physical connection. It's about understanding each other's needs and fears. And that begins with honest, open communication, even if it's hard. Sometimes, it's the things left unsaid that create the deepest rifts in a relationship. Have you ever experienced a moment where communication could have saved something important to you? Feel free to share your story or thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear how you've navigated these kinds of challenges. Emily returned for her next session with a heaviness in her demeanor that hadn't been there before. It was as if unpacking the layers of her story had left her feeling raw and exposed. Still, there was determination in her eyes, a quiet resolve to find clarity. "I've been thinking about what you said last time," she began, settling into the chair across from me. "About needs. And I realized. I don't even know what mine are anymore. I'm so focused on trying to make things better for Mark that I've completely lost sight of myself." I nodded. "That's a brave realization, Emily. But it's also an opportunity. Understanding your own needs is the first step toward figuring out how to communicate them." She exhaled sharply, as if trying to let go of her frustration. "It's not just about sex," she said. "I mean, yes, that's part of it. But it's more than that. I want to feel desired, like I matter to him. I want to feel connected. Does that make sense?" "It makes perfect sense," I replied. "Intimacy isn't just physical, it's emotional, too. It's about feeling seen and valued. And when that connection is missing, it's natural to feel a void." Emily bit her lip, her expression conflicted. "The thing is, I've been trying. I've done everything I can think of to make him happy. But nothing seems to work. I'm starting to think he just doesn't care." Her words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of her doubt. I leaned forward slightly, meeting her gaze. "Have you told him what you need? Not just what you want him to do, but how his actions, or inactions, make you feel?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "No. I guess I haven't. I've hinted, sure. But every time I try to bring it up directly, it turns into a fight. He either gets defensive or shuts down completely. It's like he doesn't want to hear it." "That kind of response can be discouraging," I acknowledged. "But sometimes, people shut down because they don't know how to handle what they're hearing. It doesn't mean the conversation isn't worth having, it just means it might need a different approach." Emily sighed, her shoulders slumping. "I just don't know if I have it in me anymore. I'm so tired of being the one who's always trying." There it was, the exhaustion that so often accompanies one-sided efforts in a relationship. "What would it look like for Mark to meet you halfway?" I asked. She blinked, as if the question caught her off guard. "I don't know," she admitted after a pause. "I guess I'd want him to ask me what I need instead of assuming. To make an effort, even if it's small. Like, holding my hand, or saying something nice without me having to prompt him. Just, something that shows he cares." "Have you thought about sharing that with him?" I asked gently. Emily's eyes filled with uncertainty. "What if he still doesn't care? What if I'm just setting myself up to be disappointed again?" "That's a valid fear," I said. "But here's the thing, Emily, avoiding the conversation doesn't make the fear go away. It just leaves you stuck in the same cycle. Being honest about your needs is a risk, yes, but it's also a chance to create real change. Even if it's hard." She nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. "I guess I've been so focused on what I might lose that I haven't thought about what I could gain." Emily's willingness to explore her feelings and fears opened the door to a deeper understanding of her relationship dynamic. As we continued the session, I encouraged her to think about ways she could approach Mark without blame, focusing instead on how she felt and what she needed. "I'm not saying it will be easy," I told her. "But sometimes, the hardest conversations are the most important ones. And you deserve to have your needs heard and respected." For the first time in weeks, I saw a flicker of hope in Emily's eyes. A friendly pause for you, reader. Have you ever felt like you were the only one trying to keep a connection alive? It's not easy to open up about what we need, but sometimes, it's the only way to truly move forward. What's your experience with having tough conversations in a relationship? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear how you've navigated those moments. Emily walked into my office, her shoulders squared, her expression steeled. It was clear something significant had happened since our last session. She wasted no time sitting down, exhaling deeply as though she'd been holding her breath for days. I talked to him, she began, her voice even but laced with tension. That's a big step, I said. How did it go? Emily leaned back, crossing her arms protectively over her chest. Not how I'd hoped. But maybe exactly how I expected. I waited for her to continue, sensing she needed to find her rhythm before diving in. I told him I felt disconnected, she explained. That it wasn't just about sex but about feeling like we're not even a team anymore. I told him I needed to feel wanted, to feel like he still sees me the way he used to. Her voice faltered, and she looked down at her hands. He listened, at first. Or at least, it looked like he was listening. But then he said something that stopped me cold. What did he say? I prompted gently. He said, maybe you're right. Maybe I don't want this as much as you do. The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. I gave her a moment to collect herself before asking, how did that make you feel? Emily let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. Like I was stupid for even trying. Like I'd been pouring my heart into something that he'd already given up on. She ran a hand through her hair, frustration evident. I asked him what he meant. If he was saying he didn't want me anymore. He said he wasn't sure. That he's been feeling trapped, like he can't meet my expectations, and it's easier to avoid it altogether. Her words tumbled out in a rush now, anger bubbling beneath the surface. He said I've been making him feel like a failure. That no matter what he does, it's not enough for me. And that's why he's pulled away, because it's too much pressure. I waited, letting her vent, knowing she needed to get it all out before we could process it. He turned this all around on me, she said, her voice rising. Like I'm the problem for wanting to feel close to him. Like it's my fault he can't handle a normal conversation about our relationship. Emily, I interjected softly, how did you respond to that? She hesitated, the anger in her expression giving way to sadness. I told him I wasn't trying to pressure him. I was just trying to fix what's broken. But he just kept saying he didn't know if it could be fixed. Tears welled in her eyes, and she quickly wiped them away. I asked him if he still loved me, and he couldn't even give me a straight answer. The room grew quiet as Emily's emotions swirled, a storm barely contained. I don't know what to do anymore, she admitted. How do you fight for something when the other person doesn't even know if they want to fight with you? I leaned forward, my tone calm and steady. Emily, I know this feels like the ground has shifted beneath your feet. But his uncertainty doesn't mean you failed. It means he's grappling with his own fears and insecurities, things that might have nothing to do with you. Her eyes met mine, searching for reassurance. But how do I move forward from here? Do I keep trying? Or do I let go? That's a deeply personal decision, I said. But it starts with clarity, both about what you want and what he's truly capable of giving. It's okay to take time to reflect and decide what's best for you. Emily left the session with more questions than answers, but also with a sense of purpose. She knew she needed to find her own strength before she could decide the next step in her relationship. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt like you were fighting alone for something important? How did you navigate the uncertainty? Relationships can be messy and complicated, but sharing your experiences might help someone else feel less alone. Drop a comment, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Emily returned to my office a week later, visibly drained but carrying a quiet determination. Her emotions were no longer a storm threatening to overwhelm her but a calm tide pulling her toward clarity. I've been thinking a lot, she began, her voice steady. About what I want, what I need, and whether Mark can give me those things. And I realized something I should have seen a long time ago. I leaned forward, giving her the space to continue. I can't fix this alone, she said. And I can't keep sacrificing myself, my needs, just to hold on to someone who might not even want to be here. Her words carried a newfound strength. Mark and I talked again, she added. This time, I didn't try to convince him to stay or make him see my side. I just asked him what he really wanted, no pressure, no expectations. And he finally admitted it. What did he say? I asked. Emily took a deep breath, steadying herself. He said he feels like he's lost himself in our relationship. That he's been trying to fit into what he thinks I want instead of being honest about who he really is. And that's why he's been pulling away. There was a pause as she collected her thoughts. He admitted that our differences in intimacy, in how we express love, have always been hard for him. He didn't know how to tell me because he was afraid of hurting me, or losing me. Her voice softened, her vulnerability shining through. I told him I appreciated his honesty, even if it hurt. And it did hurt. But at least now I know the truth. How did that make you feel? I asked. Emily gave a small, sad smile. Relieved, in a way. I mean, it's painful to know we're not on the same page. But it's also freeing. For the first time in months, I don't feel like I'm grasping at straws, trying to make sense of everything. I can finally see the situation for what it is. I nodded, sensing the shift in her perspective. What do you think your next step is? She exhaled, her expression thoughtful. We agreed to take some space. Not a breakup, necessarily, but a pause. We need to figure out who we are as individuals before we can decide if we're right for each other. That's a brave choice, I said. Taking space doesn't mean giving up, it means giving yourself and your relationship the chance to grow in a healthier way. Emily nodded. It feels right. For the first time in a long time, I'm focusing on myself, what I want, what makes me happy. And if that means we end up going our separate ways, I think I'll be okay. Over the next few sessions, Emily began to rediscover parts of herself she'd neglected for years. She rekindled her love for painting, started going out with friends again, and even signed up for a yoga class she'd always been curious about. Each time she returned, she seemed lighter, more confident. I'm realizing that I don't need someone else to validate me, she said during one session. I thought Mark's distance was a reflection of my worth, but it wasn't. It was about him, not me. And I deserve to be with someone who can meet me where I am. Her words were a testament to the strength she'd found within herself. Have you ever had to make the hard choice to prioritize yourself, even when it meant stepping back from someone you loved? It's not easy, but sometimes it's the only way to grow. I'd love to hear how you've navigated similar situations. Feel free to share your story in the comments. Your experience might inspire someone else to find their own strength.